Yes, their names are Tony and Frank, said Sarah. I remember from my interview. What are they doing? They are looking at some papers. If we go a little closer, we will be able to see what is written on some of them. Very carefully, Sarah and Richard moved nearer the window. They could see Tony and Frank talking to each other. Tony, the dark man with the beard, was sitting very near the window. He had his arm on a piece of paper, but Sarah and Richard could read some of the words on it. They wrote down the words they could see. J. Stoker, £50,000 in February, stole money. M. Whitehill, £250,000 April, killed her, old. J. Hinckley, £500 a month, married but has a girl. J. Pettigrew, £750 May, stole from her. P. Masters, £25,000 June, sold secret plans to another company. M. Harrison, £500 July, £500,000 July, killed his. S. Jones, £100,000 August, killed his girl. I think we have got the answer, Richard, said Sarah, looking at the names on their paper. They are real criminals. Look how many people they have blackmailed already. Almost one a month. Yes, and it is July now. Do you remember the blackmail letter we found? In it they asked for £500,000. So Mr. Harrison must be the person they are waiting for tonight. There is a car coming. It could be him. Quick, let us hide. A black Mercedes drove up to the farmhouse and a big man in a business suit got out. He was carrying a briefcase and looked very angry. That must be Mr. Harrison, Sarah whispered to Richard. I think he has got the money in that briefcase. I'm going to go closer to the window to listen to their conversation, said Richard. You stay here. Richard watched the man go into the farmhouse where Tony and Frank met him. They were smiling, but the businessman did not look happy. He opened his briefcase and took out several bags full of 20-pound notes. Tony and Frank counted them and then shook hands with him. He went quickly out to his car and drove away very fast. Richard went back to where Sarah was hiding. Well, she said, what were they saying? I could only hear what the dark man Tony said because Mr. Harrison was on the other side of the room. Well, Mr. Harrison, have you brought the money? Only half. We want the other 250,000 too. We aren't interested in your problems. I can't make any promises until you pay us all the money. If you don't want the police to know, give us the rest of the money. He only brought half the money with him, said Sarah, and he wanted Cloud Company to promise not to tell the police. Do you really think he killed his girlfriend? Asked Richard. Well, it's possible. He's ready to pay a lot of money to keep it a secret. At that moment, Sarah and Richard saw a white shape coming out of the farmhouse door. It was making a strange, sad sound. Look, look, it's the ghost, screamed Sarah, holding Richard's arm. Suddenly the ghost started running towards them. There was another dark shape behind it. Aha! We have caught you, shouted a man's voice. Strong hands held Sarah and Richard and pulled them towards the house. In the light from the open door, Sarah saw that Tony was holding her. Was it the ghost who was holding Richard? Or was it a man wearing a white sheet? It was Frank. You are the ghost, Sarah cried. That's right, my dear, laughed Frank. People stay away from Green Farm because they are afraid of the ghost. That is what we wanted to happen. Lock the boy up in the corner room, Tony told Frank. I will talk to the girl. He was smiling coldly. Come with me, my dear, he said to Sarah as he pulled her into the house. Sarah shouted something to Richard. She used the secret language which they sometimes spoke, when they did not want other people to understand. It's okay, I will see you soon, they won't hurt us. That was Sarah's message to Richard in their secret language. Richard sat on the floor near the locked door. The room was very small and had 2 windows. Through one window he could see cows in a field, and through the other the farmyard in front of the farmhouse. How can we escape, he thought. Where is Sarah now? I hope Cloud Company don't hurt her. Just then he heard a noise outside his door. He listened carefully. He could hear Sarah saying, "Don't push me." Someone opened and closed the door of the room next to his, and he heard Frank say, "You will stay in that room for a long time. You and your boyfriend won't be able to tell the police anything." When Sarah was alone in the room, she looked round quickly. I must find Richard and escape, she thought. We must tell the police about Cloud Company. But the window in her room was very small, too small for her to get out, and the door was locked. Perhaps Richard is in a room near here, she said to herself. I will knock on the wall and see if he answers. She knocked quietly on the wall, hoping that Tony and Frank wouldn't hear her, but nobody answered. So she tried knocking on the wall opposite. Suddenly she heard someone knocking on the other side of the wall. It must be Richard. How can I send him a message? She asked herself. I know. I will use 1 knock for A, 2 knocks for B, and so on. She wrote the letters A to Z on her piece of paper with numbers under them and counted carefully as she knocked. Then she listened to the message that Richard sent back. We must escape, was Sarah's message. I can get the key, was Richard's answer. He put a piece of paper under the door. Then he took a pencil from his bag and pushed it into the keyhole. Soon he heard the key fall to the ground on the other side of the door, and he pulled the paper carefully under the door. At last he had the key in his hand. He quickly unlocked his door and looked round. There was nobody outside his room, and the house was very quiet, so he unlocked Sarah's door. "Are you all right, Sarah?" he asked. "They did not hurt you, did they? What happened? What did Tony say to you?" "I think he is afraid that we will go to the police. He says he and Frank are detectives and that people pay Cloud Company to get information about their husbands or wives or enemies. But I don't believe him. I'm sure they are criminals." "Did he explain about the job they advertised?" "Yes, he says that they wanted some young people to work for them to find out information about other people as part of their detective work. But we know that they use their information to blackmail people like Mr. Harrison. We must leave here and tell the police what we know." "Have they gone? I haven't heard any voices for a long time. Let us look in the room they were using to see if we can find any clues." The room was empty, but there was a piece of paper on the table. "Look," said Sarah. "There is only one person who hasn't—" "Shh!" whispered Richard suddenly. "Listen." Outside, they could hear someone walking up to the door of the farmhouse. "It's a man. It's Cloud Company. They have come back," whispered Sarah. Her face was white. "What shall we do?" The door opened and Peter Williams came in. "Uncle Peter," shouted Sarah and put her arms round him. "I am so happy to see you. But why have you come?" "You told me you were going to Green Farm," said Uncle Peter, smiling. "I was thinking about it after dinner, and suddenly I thought it could be dangerous here tonight." "We have got so much to tell you," said Sarah. "I think we should leave here first. Get your bike shoe too, and we will ride home together. On the way you can tell me what you have found out." Sarah and Richard were so excited that they talked without stopping as they all rode home in the dark. "Well, this is all very interesting," said Uncle Peter, as they sat in his kitchen drinking coffee. "So Cloud Company, that is Tony and Frank, are blackmailers, and Frank pretends to be a ghost to keep people away from the farm. Why did they lock us up and then leave the farmhouse?" asked Sarah. "Perhaps they left because they thought that someone was coming," answered Richard. "Remember, they left their office in Edward Street when they saw a police car, didn't they? "What should we do now?" was Sarah's next question. "I think we should go to the police," replied Uncle Peter. "These men are dangerous, and they know that we know too much about them." "I've got an idea," said Sarah. "Couldn't we try and catch them? There is one more person they are going to blackmail. What is his name?" She looked at the piece of paper on the table. "Oh yes, Stephen Jones. Perhaps they have already sent him his blackmail letter. Why don't we phone him? We could find out when and where he's going to pay Cloud Company the blackmail money. Then the police could wait for Cloud Company and catch them as they take the money." "Stephen Jones," said Uncle Peter quietly. "I remember him. He was Anne Atkinson's boyfriend, you know, the one who lived in London. I think someone told me he came to live in Manchester a year or two ago. I would like to see him again. Yes, "All right, Sarah, let us phone him, but it is too late. It is too late to do it tonight. We will phone him tomorrow." Stephen Jones lived at Box Hill, and his number was 924-836. When Uncle Peter phoned him the next day, Stephen asked them all to visit him that evening. "Yes, you are right about Cloud Company," he told them. "They are blackmailing me. They have already asked me to pay them a lot of money, but I can't pay them anything. I am a maths teacher and I haven't got much money. They say I killed my girlfriend Anne 20 years ago, and I'm sure that is what the police think too. But I did not kill her. You must believe me. I moved here from London to try to find out who murdered her. Now I don't know what to do." He put his head on his hands. "Stephen," Uncle Peter said kindly, "we want to help you. Tell us what really happened to Anne." Stephen sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. "The last time I saw Anne was one weekend when she came to visit me in London. That weekend I thought there was something wrong. She was very quiet and didn't talk much. Just before she went back to Manchester on the Sunday evening, she started telling me about it. Old George Briggs was very interested in her. Of course, she wasn't interested in him, but she was young and pretty, and so Mrs. Briggs was jealous. She often shouted at Anne. At Green Farm, Anne sometimes felt ill. She thought perhaps Mrs. Briggs was putting something strange in her food. I told her to stay in London with me because she had no friends in Manchester, but she decided to go back. That was the last time I saw her, and we loved each other so much." Stephen put a hand over his eyes. Girl killed on farm. Police think that Anne Atkinson, aged 18, was killed about 20 years ago by her boyfriend, who was living in London at the time. She worked for Mr. and Mrs. Briggs at Green Farm. George Briggs said, "I saw her boyfriend in Manchester at the time she died. I don't think they were happy together." Mrs. Briggs said she had lots of boyfriends in Manchester. Perhaps one of them killed her. Police are looking for more information and want to ask people questions about Anne Atkinson's death. "We believe you, Mr. Jones," said Sarah and Richard together. "Now, where did Cloud Company ask you to take the money, and when?" asked Uncle Peter. "Green Farm tonight at 7:30, answered Peter. "But I can't pay." "You won't have to pay them," said Uncle Peter. "This is what we will do. I will phone the police this afternoon and talk to my friend, Inspector Clark. The police will go to Green Farm tonight and wait for Cloud Company. You will go at 7:30 and pretend you've got the money, and we will be there to watch the police catch the criminals." "That is a wonderful idea," said Richard and Sarah. And so, that evening, Uncle Peter, Richard and Sarah rode their bikes along the quiet road to Green Farm. "Do you think the police are there?" Sarah asked her uncle. "I'm sure they'll be there soon," he answered. "I feel sorry for the people Cloud Company has blackmailed," said Richard. There were police hiding in every corner of the farmyard. Inspector Clark was very pleased to see Uncle Peter again. "I haven't seen you for years, Peter," he said. "Thank you for telling us about Cloud Company. We have been looking for these blackmailers for months." "Ah, I think they are coming. Quick, Peter, hide." Everybody was very quiet as Tony and Frank drove into the farmyard. They were talking to each other and didn't see the police. They walked into the house. "I can hear another car coming," Sarah whispered to Richard. "It must be Stephen Jones." A very old Mini came round the corner into the farmyard. It stopped in front of the door and Stephen Jones got out. He was carrying a black briefcase in his hand. Then everything happened very quickly. As Tony and Frank came out of the house to meet Stephen, policemen jumped out of their hiding places and stopped the two men. A police car arrived in the farmyard. Tony and Frank were pushed into the back of the car and driven away by the police. "We won't see them again for some time," said the inspector. He turned and shook Stephen's hand. "Thank you for helping us, Mr. Jones," he said with a smile. "I must tell you something. The police don't think you killed Ann Atkinson, you know. We now believe that Mrs. Briggs killed her because she was jealous of her. I am sorry. I know you loved Anne very much." Sarah and Richard were talking about Tony and Frank. "They look different this time," said Sarah, and Richard